Andy, Captain Blue Niekamp, has over 20,000 miles of backpacking experience, including 5 end-to-end hikes on the Appalachian Trail, the Buckeye Trail, Florida Trail, Colorado Trail, John Muir Trail, Superior Hiking Trail, and many more. He is the founder and organizer of Dayton Hikers, a Meetup hiking group with 9,500 members, and is the Chief Adventure Officer of the Backcountry Guide Service Outdoor Adventure Connection. Andy states that his passion lies in organizing special hiking events and encouraging others to get involved in trail maintenance. Please join me in welcoming Andy Niekamp. Thank you.
Who here has hiked the Camino before? All right, we got some hands in the audience here. Good, okay. Who would like to hike the Camino at some point in their life? Okay, fantastic. A lot more hands go up in the air, and I hope you are inspired this evening. But who has plans to hike the Camino this year? All right, we got some hands here. Well, good. So hopefully you'll find some good information in this program. I did this journey with a travel partner, Cindy Peltier, and she is in the audience, so I want to point her out. Cindy, stand up here. So you will see pictures of Cindy, but you won't get to hear her side of the story. You only get to hear my side of the story. So if you see her squirming over there, it's because she's going, why did he pick that photo of me? You know, so I apologize in advance for that. So Cindy and I didn't really know each other very well. We met through Dayton Hikers. We both wanted to do the Camino Portuguese Way. And it's no easy feat spending 22 straight days with somebody in a foreign country. So I thank her greatly for hanging in there, doing the trek, and being a great travel partner. So thank you, Cindy. And I do want to make an apology, a couple apologies right up front. If you speak Spanish or Portuguese, I'm going to apologize in advance because I don't speak either and I try to pronounce it. So my apologies to you that speak Spanish and Portuguese. I'm going to do my best, and hopefully it's close enough to meet your approval. And also my mother, who's in the audience, Mom, raise your hand there, is a retired Spanish teacher. Mom is a retired high school Spanish teacher, and when we were growing up, she tried to teach us Spanish around the dinner table by speaking Spanish to us. And being the rebellious teenager that I was, I didn't want any part of that. So I apologize, Mom, for not paying more attention around the dinner table when you were trying to teach us Spanish. So I start my programs with a bunch of slides on facts and figures and maps before we get into the photo journey. Then also this presentation has 8 short videos. They're all under 30 seconds except for the last one, but I did capture some scenes on video that I would like to show you. So we will go ahead and get started. So what is the Camino de Santiago? Quite literally, it means the way of St. James, okay? When somebody says, I did the Camino or I'm doing the Camino, that's a lot like saying, I went to the mountains. You know, it needs further clarification because there are multiple routes. If somebody says, I did the Camino, your next question should be, well, which Camino did you do? There's the French way, which is the most popular. There's the Portuguese way, second most popular. There are over 280 Caminos in different cities. All Caminos lead to the same place, Santiago, Spain. The first journey on the Camino happened in the 9th century. And it's traditionally a walk that you do as a Catholic pilgrimage or a religious pilgrimage, and you're walking to the remains of where St. James the Great is buried or where his tomb is. This is a blow-up picture of what I just showed you. This is Spain and Portugal. As you can see, there is no one route for the Camino. There are multiple routes. So all Caminos end at the cathedral in Santiago, Spain, where the remains of St. James are interred. So who is St. James? Well, he was one of the 12 apostles. He is the patron saint of Spain. He was martyred in Jerusalem. Story goes, his remains were placed in a stone boat and sent out to sea. The boat landed in Spain, His remains were found and declared to be the bones of St. James. They were brought to present-day Santiago, and a cathedral was built for his remains. And for 1,000 years, people have been coming from all over to Europe to be close, to venerate the relics of St. James the Great. That is what the Camino de Santiago is. Camino, translated from Spanish to English, is the way of St. James. Everybody is walking towards St. James. Travelers on the Camino are called pilgrims. The most popular route is the French way. It begins in France, ends in Santiago. About half the people do that. Second most popular route is the Portuguese Way, which 33 or about a third of the people do that. That's the one I'm going to be talking about tonight. Close to 500,000 people completed a Camino last year. That's a lot of people. And that is a 12% increase from 2023. So it is a growing activity with lots of people doing it. Half the people that do a Camino are Spaniards. Well, that makes sense because the Camino is in Spain and it's a traditional Spain thing. So most of the people doing a Camino are from Spain. The second largest group are people from the United States. A lot of us, a lot of you want to go hike the Camino. And another interesting tidbit about pilgrims on the Camino is that over half are age 46 and up. For a long distance hiking trail, that's a high demographic of people who are in their later years in life. So you will be in great company if you are age 46 and above. There will be a lot of people there. And women outnumber men on the Camino. It seems to attract the demographic of women more than men. On the Camino, the scallop shell is the symbol. Navigation is easy. You're following a yellow arrow, and there's one pictured there. When you run into other pilgrims, regardless of what country they're from, your standard greeting is Buen Camino, or in Portugal, it's Bom Camino. Pilgrims often carry a scallop shell on their pack to be denoted as pilgrims. And pilgrims also carry what's called a pilgrim passport. Mine is here, and you collect stamps along the way. Maybe at your lodging place, a cathedral, a church, a chapel, a restaurant, whatever. You collect stamps, and that validates your journey for when you get to Santiago. You can present that passport and get a certificate. Walking the Camino is a personal physical challenge. It's a tough journey. It is not a wilderness journey. A lot of it is on hard surface, which is hard on the feet and bones. It's very well marked. 3/4 of the people do it for religious reasons, for atonement, things they might have done, or to be connected closer to the spiritual world. But it's also a social journey because you will meet people from around the world, from different cultures of all different ages, and you'll get a chance to interact with people from around the world. Knowing Spanish or Portuguese is not necessary, but it is helpful. There's plenty of safe drinking water. You know, Spain's a European country. It's not like Mexico. You can drink the tap water. There's ample towns along the way. I would say on any given day walking the Camino, you're going through 2 or 3 towns. There's abundant lodging. There's lots of cafes and restaurants. You never have to worry about resupply or where your next meal is coming from because there's ample opportunities. There are small grocery stores or tiendas where you can buy fruit and things to carry with you. And it's also serviced by taxis, buses, and trains. Some people that maybe set out to hike 12 or 15 miles in a day don't make it, and they finish the journey in a taxi the rest of the day. That's not a problem. And there's also baggage transfer service, where if you want to have your luggage sent ahead to your next hotel and you don't want to carry all your stuff, you can have that done for a relatively cheap price. So this is a map of Spain and Portugal. You can kind of see Portugal on the left side of that. This is what's known as the Iberian Peninsula, or Iberia. If you ever heard that term, this is what we're talking about. It's the Iberian Peninsula of Europe. And a little Portugal history is that this is not a finite history here, but around 200 BC, the Romans conquered the Iberian Peninsula. Portugal was established in a kingdom in 868, and it became its own kingdom in 1139. And in 1498, Vasco da Gama became the first European to reach India by sea. And if you remember, that's what Christopher Columbus was trying to do when he discovered the New World. But Vasco da Gama actually achieved that, and Portugal became a world power at that point. In 1910, a revolution toppled the Portuguese monarchy, and the monarchy rule came to an end after 700 years. And then they were ruled by a military dictatorship, much like Spain was, until the mid-1970s. Portugal today, it's the oldest country in Europe. It has about 10.5 million people, which is roughly the population of Ohio, give or take. It's about the size of Indiana. Portuguese is the official language. Lisbon is the capital of Portugal. And port wine, which is a dessert wine, is its most famous export and national drink. And the town of Porto, where I started my journey, is where the port wine is made and how port wine got its name. Here's a map of the Portuguese routes of the Portuguese Way. Now, if you look in northern Spain, you'll see a yellow highlighted line. That is the French Way. So if you're familiar with the French Way, it travels more through northern Spain. But there are multiple routes on the Portuguese Way. The Portuguese Way is about 380 miles. It generally starts in Lisbon. It's the second most popular Camino after the French Way. Like I said earlier, 1/3 of the people that do a Camino are doing the Portuguese route. It is less traveled and is more personal than the French Way. It's not quite so touristy in Portugal, and therefore it's a more personal experience. And this Portuguese Camino has been traveled since the Middle Ages, much like the French Way and the other Portuguese routes. Most people that do the Portuguese Way, including Cindy and me, started in Porto. And it's about a 150-mile journey from Porto to Santiago, give or take some miles depending on what route you choose. Some people start closer to Santiago, but most people doing the Portuguese Way are starting in Porto or points north. Once again, it's well marked. It's ideal for first-time pilgrims or experienced pilgrims because it's not the time commitment that the French Way is. The French Way is 480 miles, and at 15 miles a day, it takes you 5 weeks. This is something you can do in 10 days to 14 days, which is more appealing for a lot of people. But there are multiple routes, and it's somewhat confusing. There's the Litoral route, there's the coastal route, there's the central route, and the spiritual way. And Cindy and I decided we were going to do a little bit of each. So you'll see pictures from all. The most popular one is the central route. Our particular journey, we flew out of Ohio on June 18th, and we finished July 3rd. We did the Portuguese Way in 13 hiking days, 160 miles. We took 2 rest days. In hiker lingo, we call them zeros. We averaged 12.5 miles a day, which doesn't seem like much, but we did days anywhere between 4 and 20 miles. And I can guarantee you, Cindy remembers some of those 20-mile days, because and we did them all. We didn't jump in a taxi at one time. We did continue on to Finisterre. Finisterre is on the coast. A lot of people that finish in Santiago will add another 50-some miles to their journey. Translated, Finisterre means the end of the land. And the Romans thought that Finisterre was the end of the earth. It was the farthest point you could go, and that's where the earth ended. And it was once thought to be the westernmost point in Europe. It's not true, as Portugal has that. So a little bit about Camino lodging. There's hotels, there's pensions, which are guest houses or boarding houses. There's something called a hostel there, but it's not a hostel in U.S. terms. A hostel is a small family-run hotel. There's a casa rural, which is basically a family-run B&B in a rural area. And then the lower end of that is an albergue. And an albergue is what we think of as a hostel in the United States. If you wanted the cheapest lodging, $15, $20 a night, you want a bunk bed and a bunk room with a shared bathroom. A lot of people travel that way. Cindy and I decided that we wanted a private room with 2 beds and a personal bathroom. We didn't want to do the community bunkhouse, so we sought out and we stayed in private rooms. We booked a lot of our rooms on Booking.com. Booking.com is king in Europe for the mom and pop places that you stay at. Some of these places won't even have a website, but they'll be on Booking.com. We also used WhatsApp, Expedia, and then emailed directly. We paid, on average, $88 a night. We split that by 2, and you figure, a bunk bed's going to cost you $15 to $20, and for $44 a night, we had our own room and our own bathroom. Well worth it. And we did use the baggage transfer service. We sent our stuff ahead every day. And before we left the United States, we booked all of our nights between Porto and Santiago. We knew we were going to Finisterre, but we didn't book those nights in case we decided we had enough hiking. But we did book before we go. Not everybody does that. A couple more facts and figures here. The currency in Europe is the euro. It takes about $1.03 to buy a euro. The euro is plunging right now. It's about 10% cheaper than it was just in September. So those of you doing the Camino this year, your dollars are going to go further, and you're getting a price cut of 10% as opposed to a price increase. Generally, there's no tipping. Very, very few tipping. The only time you see tipping is maybe a jar on a bar in a cafe. All prices include tax. So if you're looking at a sign or a menu and it says this is the price, that is what you pay. Recommend bringing a credit card with no foreign transaction fees. We used ATMs for cash. You know, it's not necessary to get cash at home, or nobody uses traveler's checks these days anyway. And we use a debit card with no ATM fees. Both of us had Verizon, and we got the Verizon International plan, which made our phones work over there, and our numbers work just fine. There's good cell service on the Portuguese Camino. You do need a charging plug for their plug. They have a different plug in the wall than we use here in the States. And we found Google Maps, Google Translate, Google Lens, and WhatsApp very handy. So all of those apps are very, very handy. To navigate the Camino, we used the Wise Pilgrim app. It was $5 well spent. It gave us a map. It gave us a guidebook. It's well worth the money. Everybody pretty much navigates the Camino these days with some app. There's some free ones out there. If you're not an app person, then there are printed guidebooks. And these are the three most popular. We had the Brierley book, which was the one on the left. So you can buy guidebooks before you go. And the guidebooks and the apps are going to break down a particular journey, let's say between Porto and Santiago. They call them stages. And a stage is basically a day of hiking. So the journey takes 10 to 14 days. One guidebook may say, hey, there's 14 stages in our book. That just means there's 14 days. And if you follow our itinerary and you end up where we tell you to on all 14 days, you'll get there in 14 days. And they're kind of set up to, like, if it's a really difficult day with a lot of climbing, they'll do shorter miles. If it's a flatter day, they'll do longer miles. Or they'll make sure you end up in a town with decent lodging. They're not going to tell you to walk a 13-mile day and end up in a farmer's field somewhere. They're going to make sure that at the end of that stage, there is lodging and restaurants. So, okay, that's kind of the introduction about what the Camino is, a little bit about how we got there. We Ubered to Cincinnati Airport. It was going to be cheaper than parking a car there for 3 weeks, and the cheapest long-term parking. We boarded the United flight from Cincinnati to Newark, and then we flew from Newark to Porto, Portugal. It was fantastic. By the time we boarded an airplane in Cincinnati, 11 hours later, we had boots on the ground in Portugal. We took a metro to downtown, and we started walking. Our first stop was the Porto Cathedral. So landing in the Porto airport was really easy, and it's not a very big airport. And there's like a little, you get through customs and all that, and there's a little strip on the floor of the airport that says Metro. And you're dazed and confused from flying overseas and 6-hour time change, and you didn't sleep, but all you have to do is follow that little strip in the airport. And it'll take you right to the machine where you can buy a ticket, and then you get a ticket, you hop on the Metro, and 15 minutes later, bang, you're in downtown Porto, and you're walking. And we had fantastic weather when we got there. We had perfect hiking weather. So we made our way to the Porto Cathedral, which is where a lot of people decide to start their journey. It was a short walk. We toured the cathedral. We got our first stamp and our passport, and we checked a few things out. So here we are starting our journey outside the cathedral. And once again, you can see the shell, scallop shell, and you can see the yellow arrow. A view of looking down over Porto, following signs through town. That's Cindy there with her Camino shell. We got down to the Douro River, and we're following the Litoral route at this point. And there's a lot of fishing boats on the Douro River. And the fishing industry in Portugal is a major economic activity and a source of protein for the population. Those round metal things are crab traps. And then we got out to where, well, it's a picture of me walking on the seawall, kind of feeling triumphant our first day on the Camino. And then we got out to where the Douro River meets the Atlantic Ocean, and we're now picking up the coastal route. So that's actually a little lighthouse there. It's a 19th century hexagonal lighthouse, and it's about 10 meters tall and constructed of granite. We passed by this Porto sign near a beach translated Man at the Helm Beach. And we came across this sculpture in the town of Matosinhos, our first day destination. This sculpture is called The Tragedy at Sea, and it remembers the greatest nautical tragedy ever recorded on Portuguese water. In 1947, 4 fishing boats sank off the coast, causing the death of 152 crew members, causing pain and despair in the whole community. These are wailing women because their fisherman husband would not come back that day. That tragedy created 72 widows and 152 orphans. This is a picture of me the next morning. Karen's real familiar with this because I walked the French Way with her. Cups of coffee are awful small in Europe. I get Americano and I get 2 of them because I'm going to drink them both. So, and we're walking along the coastal route here. So you can see we're right on the coast of the Atlantic Ocean there. And this is the Boa Nova Lighthouse. It went into service in 1926, and it's 151 feet and can be seen over 30 miles away. This is Cindy at the chapel by the sea near the lighthouse, and me getting my picture taken by Cindy on a rocky outcropping there on the Atlantic Ocean. There's a lot of boardwalk on the Camino coastal route, and this was a little deck board that kind of welcomes different people in different languages. This is what a typical deck board walking along the coastal route. It gets you off the sand, much easier walking. And that says it's 252 kilometers to Santiago. This is one of the kind of trail signs that you see along the way. This is in La Bruges. And a couple times the boardwalk was closed for repairs on the coastal route. And there was an authorized, approved bypass that went around the closed areas. And Cindy opted to take those. I was feeling a little adventurous, like, well, maybe it's just a suggestion, you know. And so I plowed on. So the first time I tagged along with some Portuguese people, and they're like, hey, no problem. There's just one small spot, you can make it. So I kind of followed them, and they led me through the closed area. The second one was a little trickier, and I was kind of doubting myself there because there was nobody else doing it. But I did make it and met up with Cindy later on. So some more boardwalk along the coastal route, very pretty scenery. And then you kind of run into these goofy statues in Villa Cha. So more pilgrims on the boardwalk, and you can see they're carrying their shells on their pack. Going to the town of Mindelo, and the sign translates to the Sea of Freedom. So sailing on the sea is thought to be freedom and bravery, that the seas will free you. And this was salad at dinner in Villa do Conde. So in Villa do Conde, we'd spent 2 days of hiking, and we're now going to cross over to the central route on a path that we're following in the Wise Pilgrim. And we got to follow the aqueduct of Santa Clara. It is the second largest aqueduct in Portugal, and it was built between 1626 and 1714. And it has 99 arches stretching for 2.5 miles. And it was built to bring spring water from the hills and mountains to the convent, the Santa Clara convent in Vila de Condo. So on our route, crossing over to the Central Way, walked along this aqueduct for about a mile. And there's a picture of Cindy walking along it. So here's a little map pointer. We're crossing over. We did hit some muddy sections here. A lot of walking in Portugal, and a lot of roads in Portugal are cobblestone. And cobblestone roads are one of Portugal's oldest traditions. They've been around since the 14th century, and they're usually made from basalt or limestone. And then we passed this cemetery of St. Peter near the town of Rates, or pronounced like rats, and saw this guy swapping out some flowers, and he just looked so cute that I had to take his pictures. Believe it or not, the flowers that he's holding were the stale ones that he threw away. As soon as I took these pictures, he threw them in a dumpster, and he put fresher ones on the graves, which I thought still looked pretty good to me. So now we made it to the central route of the Camino and narrates. We went to the Church of St. Peter. This was built in the 12th and 13th centuries and is considered to be one of the finest examples of Romanesque architecture in Portugal. And we always toured the churches. This was inside. And then a Camino marker marking 209 kilometers. The central route goes along roads that wind through farm fields. This is in the town of Corel. And we made it to the town of Barcelos, and we're taking our first 0 day, our first rest day here. And this is what a typical European hotel room, 2 beds look like. So this was a very typical room that we had. And of course, we did a little celebrating in town here. So we went out for a couple of adult beverages and some dinner. We went to the Church of Santa Maria Maior. This was built in the 14th century, and it has a medieval appearance. And this is the beautiful altar in that church. And there is a statue of the Virgin Mary. This represents Our Lady of the Sorrows. She has 7 swords in her to represent the 7 sorrows. And the 7 sorrows are a series of events in the life of Virgin Mary that represent her suffering. Picture of me, Captain Blue, at the town in Aberim. A lot of town faucets look just like this to get good drinking water. And then I was fortunate to be hiking by the chapel of Our Lady of Lapa during a Sunday procession. And I started hearing these booms, and I saw townspeople gathering, and they were doing a procession or a parade. And I wasn't quite sure what was going on, because at first it looked like they were carrying caskets or coffins. But they are actually carrying statues of saints on that bed of flowers there. So they are venerating a saint. And this chapel celebrates a miracle that occurred in 1493 when a young shepherd who was mute began to speak after discovering an image of Virgin Mary in a cave. So a miracle occurred, this chapel was built, and that's what they're celebrating. And they all piled into this small church. So this is a kilometer to Ponte de Lima. Ponte means bridge. So this is the bridge over the Lima River, or in Ohio, we'd probably call it Lima. So this is me along the Lima River approaching town. And when we got to town, we noticed that a street fair was happening right in the middle of the Camino. So we hit it on the perfect day. We enjoyed our stay here, and there was a lot of food for sale. And I was struck because there was a lot of meat and a lot of cheese, unrefrigerated, out in the summer heat. And they would give you free samples. And I was a little worried, like how long has this cheese been sitting here? And it's looking a little, greasy, and I had no problems. I sampled it. We refrigerate our meats and cheeses here in the States. They don't do that in Portugal, and you can buy things in street markets and be just fine with them. At least I did. This is a video that I want to show you. It was a very festive atmosphere. This one's only 7 seconds long. And this is the kind of stuff you run into on the Camino just by chance. So there was another video I want to play for you. This is 15 seconds, and these are locals gathering for music and friendship. This is just a weekend day that people are getting together. Portuguese and Spaniards are very social. And if you look back in the distance there, you can see a medieval bridge that the Camino is going to cross. So just a very festive atmosphere in Ponte de Lima. This is not my photo. This is a stock photo, but this is that medieval bridge that dates back to 1368. And on the other side of the bridge, this fellow had a shop, and he was, making and selling trinkets to the pilgrims. And he also counted the number of pilgrims that he interacted with. And if you look at the bottom, you can see 18,317. He actually wipes the chalk off and increases the number when he talks to you. So since August of 2021, he's interacted with 18,000 pilgrims. And I bought a little trinket from him and took his picture. And then we had a long climb up to Alto de Portello, probably the steepest climb on the whole Portuguese Way between Porto and Santiago. And you come across these stone crosses, and it's customary to place a stone at the foot of the cross. And the act of placing a stone at the foot of a cross is seen as a symbolic gesture of leaving one's burdens behind and seeking spiritual renewal, whether physical or emotional. And many times these stones are brought from the pilgrims from home. So if you go to the Camino, maybe take a stone with you, because you will have ample opportunity to lay them at a foot of a cross. This is a screenshot out of the app of the mountain we had to climb. Now, it's not quite that steep, it's exaggerated, but I'm sure Cindy remembers that long climb too. So once you got to the top of it, there was an arrow there pointing you the way to go, and this was the pasture in Fontura. This is another room we had in an albergue. And we went to dinner with a group of people from the albergue, and there were 3 Spaniards here, there were 2 Americans, and 1 Belgian. And the talk of the day was basically that long climb of the day that we did there. So, and these are sheep being moved from one pasture to another. You can see the Camino sign there, very common to run into livestock. Cindy had an albergue here with another one of those directional signs. And this is the Minho River and the bridge that marks the border between Portugal and Spain. When you cross this bridge, you're walking into Spain. Midway on this bridge, they have a little painted here where you're leaving Valenca and you're crossing into Tui, Spain. So you're leaving Portugal behind and going into Spain, and you get on the other side and you're now in España. It's a new country, it's a different language, it's a different time zone. Good morning in Portuguese goes from bom dia to buenos dias, thank you, goes from obrigado to gracias, and your greetings to the pilgrim goes from bom camino to buen camino. So here we are, here's the map of where we are. So the next morning in Tui, as we were heading out, I saw some Spanish military guys in the town square in Tui. And I thought, well, this is interesting. It's something going on that I need to know about. And I saw a bunch of these Spanish military guys. Well, it turns out that once a year, the Spanish army holds a foot race on the Camino de Santiago. 6-man teams walk or run 75 miles with a loaded backpack and a rifle and stop along the way for a series of military skills tests. We just happened to be in Tui that morning when it was going on, okay? There were also units from Great Britain, Portugal, and it's an overnight physically demanding feat, and the fastest teams will make that 75-mile journey in 16 hours. I sought out the US guys, and I went over and said, hey, I'm from the United States. These guys are temporarily stationed in Spain, but their unit is out of Virginia, and they were very nice to pose with a photo for me. And so I went back to where the other brigades were just kind of hanging out. And so, the race is starting. I don't even know when it's going to start, but these guys, they're kind of relaxed. They're talking about the race. They're just kind of hanging out. Then all of a sudden, I hear somebody yell out something in Spanish. And in 1 second, they're all at attention, standing still. So whatever that command was, like attention, these guys lickety-split. I mean, it happened instantly. They didn't have to look at each other. They knew what to do. They fell in line, and they kept this formation. Then another video here, this one's 25 seconds long. The Spanish Army played. And then a priest blessed the troops. They went to the starting line to wait for the starting gun, and boom, they were off. And we never saw them again, except Cindy saw them down the trail a little bit, so here they are a few miles down the Camino. So I was going to join that race, but I was afraid of showing up these younger guys and hurting their feelings by beating them, so I decided I wouldn't enter the race. So This is one of the Roman bridges that you see. The Romans built bridges when they occupied the Iberian Peninsula. And this is over the River Loro, another small Roman bridge. The Camino goes along a stream here. We made it to the town of Perino. I told you made it to the town of Perino. I told you we went into a new time zone. Look at what time the sun set that time of year. So Spain is on Central European time. Portugal is on Western European time. The sun didn't set till 10:14, which is awfully late for pilgrims. Our bedtime was way earlier than that. And we stayed at Hotel Azul, which means Hotel Blue. And my trail name's Captain Blue, so I kind of took a picture of this. This is the marker for 100 kilometers to Santiago, 62 miles to go on this journey. And I met this is Ilse from the Netherlands. We had another uphill journey, and I was walking pretty fast, and I looked behind me, and this lady was about 100 yards behind me, and I'm passing younger people, just going, I don't have a pack on, I'm used to mountains. And every time I looked behind me, she was just not that far behind me. And I go, this girl's walking pretty fast too, you know. I finally caught up with her at the cafe. And I was like, hey, you're a fast walker. And she goes, hey, you're a fast walker. She is from the Netherlands. She was able to keep up with me. She is from a town called Maastricht, which is near the border of Germany, where my ancestors emigrated to the USA from the 1850s. And Cousin Tom's in the audience there too. So his ancestors are from the same place. She immediately recognized our last name as being more Dutch than German. So she lives in the Netherlands, very close to Margaten Cemetery, where 8,301 American soldiers are buried from World War II. All of these soldiers were killed during the fighting of the Germans in World War II. Like a lot of Dutch people, she adopts a grave. She adopted the grave of Virgil Barton. Rifleman Virgil Barton, age 19, from Warsaw, Indiana, was killed in action on April 15, 1945. She visits his grave on his birthday, and she visits his grave on his day of the death, and she's been doing that for 10 years. She said the Dutch people would not be free if it wasn't for American troops. Their Independence Day, the day they celebrate Independence Day, is May 5th. And that was the day in 1945 that the American troops liberated the Netherlands from the Nazis. So that's how they celebrate their Independence Day. And I just found this whole story fascinating that I had to include this in here. So this is the other side of that steep climb, Camino marker of 73 kilometers. Cindy on her way to Pontevedra. Since we're in that last 100 kilometers, this is an extremely large youth group crossing over the Verdugo River on a medieval bridge that dates back to the 11th century. We are now getting onto the spiritual route. So here we are jumping up on the spiritual route. And this is an overlook. You can kind of see some people getting their pictures taken on the rocks. That's the town of Vigo down below. And there's a picture of me on that rock. And then along the journey, you pass a lot of these trinket walls. I don't know what they're for, but you can take something or you can leave something. Some people prefer the spiritual route as it's more in the woods and it's more natural surface trails. Some people prefer the spiritual route because it goes by two monasteries. This is the monastery of St. John of Porto. This is the altar in the monastery. This is a side chapel. And as we continued on, these are some grazing horses on the way to Armentria. And this is the monastery of St. Mary in Armentria. And you can see some people kind of dressed in black there. There was going to be a wedding that evening in the church, in the monastery, and this was the band that was playing. And you can see they're all dressed in black, and it was a hot day, and they're all staying in the shade. But I happened to be there when they were rehearsing their music, and I'm like, I'm hanging around. I'm crashing the rehearsal here. So I got a video here. This is 21 seconds. And then inside, the keyboard player and the violin player are rehearsing, and I just kind of went right up and made another video. This one's a little bit longer at 28 seconds, but it's some very beautiful music in an ancient monastery where the sound just resonated. To me, that sounds like a professional recording, and that's just a smartphone standing 10 feet away. So, and then one more rehearsal. The band actually came in and did a little rehearsal. This is a 12-second video. And then the wedding party starts to arrive. And these little fellas were waiting for their turn to go into the church, kind of dressed up in their Spanish garb. And then the bride entered the church and the service went on. Later that evening, this is another video. Later that evening, we went to evening vespers and the singing the nuns in the monastery and the blessing of the pilgrims. So this is a short video with the nuns singing. And the spiritual way continues down along the stream. Picture me by the stream, now heading downhill after the long uphill day. Camino goes through the farmlands. This is inside the chapel of St. Peter. This little guy was the caretaker, giving you passport stamps. He looked really cute, so I had to get his photo. There's Cindy moving along through a vineyard. Camino sign pointing the way to town. We're back on the Atlantic coast where the Arosa River meets the ocean, crossing over the bridge into Villanova de Aroso, and a huge directional arrow, so you can't get lost here. Typical breakfast here, toast, ham, and avocado with coffee. Cindy had dinner at the apartment here. That was what she brought home. And then I had a dinner of octopus, okay? And that was really enjoyable. So a lot of octopus comes out of the ocean, and Spaniards, Galicians eat it. Now I've had octopus before, but it's always been breaded than fried, and everything breaded than fried always tastes good. But this was octopus that wasn't breaded than fried, where you could see the little suction cups and everything, and it was quite tasty. Those of you going to Spain, definitely try it. And of course, we had to have some ice cream too, so. And so part of the spiritual way journey involves taking a boat ride up the Arosa River. And even though we're getting into a boat, it is the official route of the spiritual way Camino. And this is kind of a map. We're basically going to get on a boat at the bottom there, and we're going to take a boat up the river to Ponteceres. And this boat ride is how the spiritual way gets its name, because that stone boat with the bones of St. James the Great, this was believed that his boat floated up the river. So this was the route that stone boat took to get inland. So this is why you as a pilgrim can get on a boat and take this journey. It is about 17-mile journey, and it's about an hour and 20 minutes, and it's the official route for the completion certificate. Picture of Cindy and me. This is I've been with Andy Niekamp for 2 weeks look, and I'm tired of selfies. This is where the boat ends in Ponteceres, so we're getting real close to Santiago now. This is the route to Milidario. Some more routes on the Central Way. We're back on the Central Way. And entrepreneur, little young girls here, they were selling things. I know you can't read the sign too well, but they were selling bracelets for €1 or €2, which is, $1 or $2, and they were giving out free lemonade. And so I bought 2 bracelets, and I got a free glass of lemonade, and I paid them €20 and said, keep the change. And they were extremely delighted. So I was a lemonade salesman when I was that age too, so I always loved it when people overpaid. This is a horero, or a Galician granary. This is a grain storage bin. And it's raised off the ground to keep rodents out of it, and it has slits in the walls for ventilation. Today, they are historical artifacts. If you have one of these horeros on your property, you can't tear it down, and you must maintain it. And they're very common in the Galician area of Spain. So here, we made it to the Cathedral of Santiago. This is my picture, and if you notice, there's no people in the background there. So people were like, well, how did you get a picture with nobody in the background? That's a very popular square. Well, number one, we got there early. But two, the magic of AI photo editing tools. I made them all magically disappear. So it looks like I had the whole place to myself. This is Cindy's finishing photo with people in the background. But we were there early, so there would have been 10 times the number of people later in the day. So we didn't go in the cathedral right away. We went over to the pilgrim office to get our certificate, our Compostela. And here's a picture of Cindy showing her pilgrim passport. They kind of validate your journey. They look in your passport. You're supposed to get 2 stamps a day. They want to make sure that you did the journey, that you said that you did. And then they give you, so they kind of look at your passport there. This is kind of what your pilgrim passport looks like. And then they give you a Compostela, which is their certificate, which really, you only have to hike the last 100 kilometers on foot to get the Compostela. That's kind of what they're looking at, 2 stamps a day for the last 100 kilometers. So the day that we arrived, a total of 1,600 pilgrims arrived, and on a popular day, over 4,000 people visit the pilgrim office. So we went back to the cathedral, and we saw the tomb of St. James. Apparently there was a no photography fine that I couldn't read in Spanish, and I accidentally got a photo of the tomb here. Karen knows that from the first time we were there. This is the altar in the church, the St. Santiago Cathedral, and you can kind of see something hanging there, that big metal object. This is the Buto from Mario, okay? It translates to smoke belcher. This is the largest incense burner in the world. If you grew up in the Catholic Church, you know incense is part of the rituals. This is the largest incense burner in the world. It weighs 175 pounds. It takes 8 men to lift it and swing it. And it's been used, this ritual has been going on since the 12th century. And it's been said that the incense covers the stench of the unwashed pilgrims. Now, I have a video here. This is the longest video. It's just 1.5 minutes. I want to show you of the Buddha Famaro swinging. The only days that it officially swings are on holy days, and we were not there on a holy day. And if it swings outside of a holy day, somebody, usually a tour group, a large has to pay $500 to have it swing. We were lucky. We were there at noon mass. Chris was there, and we got to see it swing. So this is a 90-second video. The 2 things I'll point out. You can kind of see the guys in the maroon robes. You're going to see them do their thing, and then they get out of the frame, and you won't see them again. But they're doing all the work to make this thing swing. And the guy in the red robe on the stage, you will see him 3 different times telling the visiting priest to get back, get back. You don't want this 175-pound thing hitting you. You'll see how fast it goes. And it does fall off. It's been known to break off, and the last time it broke off was in 1937. Lighting the incense. Really swinging now. So that's the end of the video there. So bear with me here. Our journey continues on a little bit more. I do have a few more slides. We ran into Chris Leesman, who's in the audience here. He had finished his second Camino the day before. We had some tentative plans. Raise your hand, Chris. So we had tentative plans to meet up, but we ran into him in the church. That's how the universe works sometimes. We're just walking to the cathedral, and there he was. So we went to lunch with him. And now we're going to continue on 50 more miles, roughly 50 miles, to Finisterre, the end of the world. And that's a map to Finisterre. The Romans named Finisterre the end of the land. It literally translates to the end of the land. And this was their map of the world in 45 AD. This was created by Pomponius Mel, who was the earliest known Russian geographer. And if you look at my compass rose there, you'll notice that east is up and west is down. So Spain is at the bottom and Africa is to the right. And the concept of magnetic poles would not be discovered for another 1,500 years. So the sun rises at the top of the world and it sets at the bottom of the world. So that was their view of the world. So this is what this map was made. And the term north was actually derived from a Greek word that means to the left of the sunrise. So here we are with the Camino marker, basically saying it's about 56 miles to go. Other pilgrims are leaving Santiago, heading to Finisterre. This is the bridge over the Maceira River, built in the 14th century. This is the bell tower at the Church of San Julian de Negreira. Ran into some cattle on the road, farmer moving livestock from pasture, more cobblestone roads, more scenic woods walking. And this was our first view of Cape Finisterre, the end of the world, where the Romans was believed that this is where the earth ended. Walked on the beach to the town of Finisterre on the way to Cape Finisterre. This is the town of Finisterre. And most people walk the road from the town of Finisterre to Cape Finisterre. It's about 2.5 miles, and that was kind of the route that Cindy chose. It's the most direct route. But I studied the All Trails app, and I'm like, hey, there's a mountain I can climb over, and there's some trails I can take and bushwhack and get on some roads. So I took an intentionally more difficult route up and over the hill, and I was able to get on top of the mountain and look down at Cape Finisterre at the end of the world there. And that's a picture of me. I know you can't read that marker, but it says it's kilometer marker 0.000. So that is basically, there's a lighthouse there, there's the end of the world there. This is Cindy with her finishing photo at the marker at 0.000. From town of Finisterre, we took a bus back to Santiago, got on another bus, and took a bus to Porto, where we got back to the Porto airport that flew us to New York. I've got 2 more slides to go here. One, I want to pause for a brief commercial announcement. Nan mentioned this. March 12th, I'll be at the Springboro Library giving a program on conquering the Camino. Learn how to plan your own Camino trip. March 20th, Karen Power, who's in the audience in there, we did the French Way in 2023, and we're going to give a program on our French Way journey in Greenville. We would love to have you up there. And I'm repeating this program again on March 24th, so if you want to see it again, or you know somebody that missed it that would like to see it, or you're watching this program on YouTube and you want to see it in person, that's going to be March 24th in Kettering at the Wilmington Branch Library. And this is my final slide. If you scan that QR code or write down that website address, that'll give you the details on the program. And this is my last slide of Cindy and me, and this is the end of my program. Thank you very much. Okay, I got the sign from the back that I have time for a couple of questions. So, anybody? Yes?
Is it possible just to camp along the way?
The question is it possible to just camp along the way? I would find it very difficult because it is very built up and you would not find established campsites along the way, and you would have to basically camp on private property. With that being said, we did see some people on the French Way that camped under bridges because they didn't have money to stay in town. So, but no, it is not a camping destination. Nobody brings a tent. Nobody brings a sleeping bag unless they're staying in an albergue. So good question. Yes?
I'll be walking the coastal route, a little north of Porto the first week in May. What are the best hiking trail shoes, and would I need a trekking stick?
Okay, so the question is, you're going to be walking the coastal route the first part of May. Might see you there, because I'm planning on going back the first part of May. What kind of footwear, and do you need trekking poles? So I highly recommend comfortable padded footwear. Hokas were my choice for both Caminos that I did. You do not need a hiking boot. You do not need a heavy boot. The people that bring heavy boots tend to regret it. So lots of padding. I got Hoka Speed Goats on. I did that on the French way. Then I wore another version of Hoka. So definitely lightweight padded. And I brought trekking poles. So I found them very helpful in hill country. Even if you're doing the whole spiritual route, you're not going to be able to take that all the way to Santiago. You're going to have to get off it at some point. But buy rubber tips for them, because that metal clanging on the stones will drive people crazy. So bring rubber tips. Good question. Yes?
How flexible are your pensions or the places that you book? If you want to spend an extra day somewhere, or if you have a health issue, is it easy to modify these?
Yeah, so the question is, the pensions and the casas and the places that you're staying, how flexible is it on the booking? Okay. I would answer that with, it depends what level of accommodation you want, okay? When Karen and I did the French way, we found that if we didn't book a week out, we weren't getting rooms with 2 beds and a private bath. And we were getting closed out of those, and we had to spend the night in an albergue. If you go during a popular time, I recommend booking several days in advance. If you're going to carry all your own gear and you're going to stay in the albergue hostel set up, you can be very flexible, because towns have multiple hostels, and you could wake up one morning and say, you know what, I don't want to hike today, I'm going to stay here. And chances are they would have space for you. Now, they might kick you out at 8 o'clock and say, come back at 2 o'clock. A lot of hostels will do that. They'll close for 6 hours, but you could stay there. So all depends on what you want lodging-wise, what you're willing to settle for. So, another question? Yes.
During each of the sections, did you have time, like if you were going to run into that farmer, was there time to socialize? Or was it, hey, we're kind of on point now because we've got to get to that next at the end of this section?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm sure you might have heard it, but I'm going to repeat it for the Miami Valley Cable Council people here. That, was there time for socializing, or was it walking all the time? So I would say if you construct your itinerary properly, you will have ample time for socializing. Pilgrims like to get started early in the morning, and a lot of times we were done by 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and that left time for going out and seeing things, even though the Spaniards take a siesta. You talk with people along the way. When you stop for a cup of coffee or you stop for breakfast, you're meeting people along the way. There's ample social time. There were a number of times when Cindy walked on the Camino and made friends and chatted with them all day long, and there were times when I made friends too. So now, if you're on a limited time schedule and you're trying to do 20-mile days, you may not have as much time for socializing. It's very common to meet somebody and say, hey, we're going to dinner at this restaurant, come join us. Some people thrive on that. That's part of their journey. So it is a social journey. There is time for that. Good question. Other question? Yes?
Did you have any trouble finding restrooms along your hike each day?
Did I have any trouble finding restrooms along the way? Cindy, how would you answer that?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Sometimes yes and sometimes no.
I was going to say, I've read a lot of horror story kind of things.
I would say there's no horror stories either on the French way or the Portuguese way that I saw. And what I didn't tell you, when I met Ilse from the Netherlands, I was really trying to get ahead of her so I could go in the woods and go to the bathroom. But she was always back there the whole time. So I was, darn. So, but if you're comfortable going outside in a cornfield or a woods, there are ample opportunity for that. So, yes, Tom.
You say you were done. What does that definition amount to? Does that mean you've got your 15 miles in?
Well, yeah, so we booked ahead. So when we were done for the day, we booked ahead, okay? So before we left the States, we knew where we were staying for the first 14 nights. So sometimes we got there early, and lots of times we got there before check-in, but our baggage was always there, and they always let us in. Plus, we had ample time to stop at churches along the way and sightsee too. So it can be whatever journey you want to make it. So Cynthia.
Did you feel any difference in atmosphere or vibe, between the French way and the Portuguese way?
So was there a difference in vibe between the French way and the Portuguese way? So the two different Caminos that I did. So definitely, okay, lots more people in the French way, a lot more touristy, a lot more random accordion players or saxophone players showing up, wanting tips or whatever. Definitely way more people, okay? It was a great trip. I recommend everybody doing it. But the vibe on the Portuguese way was more personal, It wasn't quite as blingy, wasn't quite as touristy, but it had all the infrastructure that we needed. There are two different journeys. And the Portuguese are very nice, and the Spaniards are very nice. They're very social people. They don't entertain themselves in their houses because their houses are small. They were built 300 years ago. So they all meet at the corner pub, That's where their socializing takes place. And whether you do the French way or the Portuguese way, you will run into that. So a couple more questions. Yes, Amanda.
So with the luggage service, how soon did you have to have it out? Was it pretty reliably there when you'd arrive?
Yes, so the question was about the baggage transfer service. So what we did, Karen and I on the French way and Cindy and I on the Portuguese way, is every morning by 8 o'clock, you had to have your suitcase, duffel bag, backpack in the lobby of the hotel. And you just left it there with lots of other suitcases and duffel bags or backpacks. You would attach an envelope and you would put €6 on it and you would write where it needs to go. That's what we did on the French way. Although the Portuguese way, we arranged everything in advance because we knew where we were staying. And you leave, and somebody comes at some point and picks up that suitcase and drives it where it needs to go, and it magically appears in the lobby of where you're staying that night. And it's right there, and it was never not there. So, and both times, Cindy and I and Karen and I, we just shared one baggage transfer. So we're like paying $3 each to not carry 10 pounds of stuff all day. Hands down the way to go in my book. So, but very easy to arrange. You can book it all online ahead of time, your baggage transfer, or you can do it day by day. Good question. All these topics I'm going to cover in my March 12th Conquering the Camino program at the Springboro Library I'm doing for Nan. So, Dan's got a question.
Andy, what's your next destination?
Well, my next destination's back to the Portuguese Camino. So, kind of got some plans brewing on that. Do it again, learn it some more. So, and then there's maybe a trip out to the western states to do some backpacking. So, I'll have a brand new program for you next year. So, all right, I'll take one more question here because I know you've been sitting here a long time. Anybody have one more burning question? Yes.
How about safety on the trail?
How about safety on the trail? And that's probably a better question for Cindy or Karen. I felt very safe. The crime rate in Spain and Portugal is a fraction of what we have here. There is not the gun violence. There is not the level of robberies and things that we have here in the States. It's a very, very safe place to visit. Now, with that being said, if you have a brand new iPhone and you're in an albergue hostel and you leave it sitting out, there might be a crime of opportunity or something. So that kind of stuff can and does happen. On the French way, we ran into the Civil Guard, their national police, quite common. And they basically made you walk through a roadblock. So if you were being followed by somebody you didn't want to be followed by, you would walk into the hands of the police. So it felt very, very safe on the Camino. That is a major business for them. They do not want incidents happening to their pilgrims that come from around the world. There's a lot of people that depend on pilgrim dollars in Spain and Portugal, and they are going to protect that industry. So good question. Very safe journey. So with that, Dan and Nan, I think we will end the program. Thank you.